Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Club. Once again, we have a race seat with Group 3 cars. There's strategy involved, but to no one's surprise, the GTR and the Supra are all over the leaderboard, and the Genesis is up there too. However, you may be familiar with the anti-meta car. It was featured as an anti-meta car a few weeks ago. Let's get into it. Once again, the anti-meta car is the M6. It's not really exceptional in any one way, but it is above average in just about every single category. I always love being able to represent Samantha Tan Racing in any way that I can since I'm on the esports team, and this is a recreation of the M4 GT3 car. As always, the GTR and the Supra are absolutely prolific, with the Genesis all over the place as well. There are a few outliers, with another M6 in 26th place. Schmoked hit a really nice lap. I was able to put it in 68th place. I hope just one person beats me. That would be pretty nice. There are some 4Cs and RSO1s, as you might expect, but of course the Supra and GTR are king. Red Bull Ring is all about knowing exactly where the track limits are and using them to your advantage. As soon as possible, I position my car as far onto the green part of the track as possible, looking for the 100 meter board. As soon as you pass under it, brake hard, get down to second gear, and start turning in following the black lines on the track. Get back up to third gear for traction and to save yourself a shift, but you've got options here. I like to go over the yellow portion, just making sure I balance the car with the throttle, but you can also just go straight past it and get fully on the throttle a little bit earlier than that. As you track out, make sure not all four tires go past the yellow part of the exit curbing, but you can go all the way on top of it. Be really careful though, it's really easy to get a penalty there. For the next corner, you can either completely straddle the curbing or just go next to it, which is what I do, but whatever you do, don't start braking while your tires are on the curbing. Once again, we're looking for the 100 meter board on the left, and you want to brake right after it. I braked just maybe a half of a foot too early. You can go up on the curb a little bit after you've gotten your car slowed down, but not as you're first getting on the brakes. You'll notice that I hit the inside curb just a little bit, but that little bit was enough to delay when I could get fully on the throttle. Every bit of time that you delay getting on the throttle is going to be magnified by the end of the straight, so even if it seems like almost nothing at the beginning, it's definitely going to be something at the end. Just like the last corner, I completely avoid the curbing on this next corner. You may notice a pattern. We are once again braking at the 100 meter board, maybe even just a little bit past it. Brake in a straight line, and you want to be in second gear by the time you start turning in at the 50 meter board. When you get closer to the apex, you want to downshift to first and fully come off the brakes gently so you can get the car to rotate in. Get on the throttle as early as you can, using as much of this exit curbing as you can, but be careful because the green part can be slippery and it can suck you off into the dirt. Once again, I'm going off using as much of the off portion of the track as I possibly can, using all of that curbing and looking for the 50 meter board. I like to angle myself towards the apex before braking since I'm not going to 100% brake. This allows you to avoid having to wait for the weight to transfer all the way to the side of the car, so all of the braking that you're doing allows you just to decrease the radius of the turn without any kind of wasted time. This is a downhill corner, so if you get on the throttle too early or too hard, you will get some oversteer, which I did, but I was able to correct it just in time. You can use all of the red and white curb, but going over this white line will get you a penalty. Like the last corner, we turn in slightly before we touch the brakes, so the brakes are just decreasing the radius of the corner a little bit, staying in third and then getting on the throttle as soon as we possibly can, following those black lines as a guide. If you steer too much or if you get on the throttle too quickly, you can slide yourself off the track there, so be very careful on throttle application. The final sequence is very tricky, so be very careful to be gentle on the throttle on exits. Once again, making use of all of the track that we possibly can, we're going to look for the fence to the left right before the 50 meter board. Get down to third gear and try to make sure you hit this apex before even thinking about getting on the throttle, because as soon as you touch that throttle, you're going to find that the front end wants to wash out. Be very careful since it's downhill. Using as much of the red and white curbing as you possibly can, you're going to look for the yellow bumps on the left to start braking. You want to be back up to third gear before you get on the throttle, and you want to use gentle throttle inputs to balance the car over the bump. I want to talk a little bit about what I mean by balancing the car over the bumps. If you give it 100% throttle, for instance, then you're going to transfer a lot of the weight towards the back of the car. And if you do that, then the shocks in the back are going to be compressed a lot. And there's a chance when you go over the bumps that you're going to get the maximum compression. You're going to bottom out, essentially. And when that happens with no travel, then the tires aren't going to be able to grip effectively. They're going to be really unpredictable. They can make your car bounce in various ways. By having just a little bit of throttle, you're making sure that you're not squishing the rear shocks all the way down. And when you do that, it gives a little bit of play. So when you go over those bumps, if you're not fully on the throttle, then your shocks, your suspension can move a little bit, and that makes sure you don't bottom out. And that way it becomes predictable, or it stays predictable. So you can just go straight over. When the car has settled past the bump on the flat track, you can get on full throttle, making sure, again, you don't go past the red and white part of the curbing, and of course, don't touch that grass. You can go touch grass after you nail a successful quality lap. Some people, and it used to include me, were not able to go all the way up on the curb right here for the first braking zone, but since then, it has worked out for me. I'm not quite sure why I wasn't able to do it in the past and why it seems to work now. It might be a physics thing, but if you have trouble with it, feel free not to go all the way off the track there. You can still get a good time by just using normal track limits. Because of the height difference here on this corner, it's actually possible to completely miss the apex here and still get a really good exit, because you can get on the throttle fully a lot earlier than if you have to wait because you bumped yourself on the apex. I have seen some people straddle the curb on the last corner. I don't think I've ever seen anyone straddle this curb or use the curb here successfully for braking, so I would just avoid it if I were you. Obviously, you could have used a little bit more curb than I did on the entrance and exit there, so there's time to be found there as well. Like I mentioned in the breakdown, I like to angle my car towards the apex before I get on the brakes. That way we don't have to brake and then transfer the weight to the side of the car as we turn in. That transition can take a long time. Same with this corner. For this last sequence, I advise patience above all else. On this first corner, it's really steeply downhill, so you can really get a lot of understeer getting on the throttle too hard, and on the last part, on the final corner, you can get track limit penalties really easily, especially since you've pretty much got to go over that big bump and balance the car out. Just be real careful and be real patient with this track. Yesterday during my stream, I wasn't quite able to get a good enough result with the M6 to use it as my showcase anti-meta car. I had a pretty good result in 6th place from the back, but it wasn't quite good enough to showcase exactly what the M6 was capable of. I knew I could get a really good result with this car, and I wanted to show off what it could do defending and attacking the meta cars. And even though I didn't quite get the examples I wanted in this race, I was able to showcase something else that this car could do that could really possibly help you in winning these races this week. I always like to race from the back because obviously I'll have to attack a lot of people and make a lot of overtakes for that to work, but then of course if I can get to the front quickly, or if I can get ahead of any of the meta cars quickly, I can also show what the car can do while defending, because I think a lot of you probably don't really start from the back. If you set a really good time and you start closer to the front or mid-pack, then not everything I do racing from the back is going to apply. Since this is a strategy race, that gives us another option, and it gives us something to really look for when we're using the anti-meta car. I knew I had to be extra careful. The guy that was directly in front of us in the last race actually dove from about 4/10 behind. I was able to give him space after that, and he luckily did give me space after diving, but then when I tried to pull off the same move on him, he punted me directly off the track, completely ruining my race, so I wasn't about to try to pull the move off on him one more time. I'd never raced the guy who was behind me now, so I thought it was best to just defend early, make it really clear that I was going to defend and not give him the position, and hope that we were going to be able to stay clean. As expected, the guy behind me got a really good exit compared to me, and that way he had some overlap going into the next corner, so I had to be careful and give him space, which I did. I did get on the throttle a little too aggressively, but I was able to save it. I didn't hit him, and I was able to get a good exit there, and we were able to get all the way in front of him by the time we got to this corner. Andre, however, did not get a good exit. I bumped him on exit, which ruined my momentum and allowed the guy behind us to get up next to me. And seeing how aggressive he was being, I decided to just kind of hang back, and that was a smart idea. Trying to sneak in next to him, Andre was not paying any attention to where I was, and I think he kind of took it personally with the fact that I didn't just allow him to move in front of me. So you'll see exactly what he did in a second. Now, it's scary enough being a sandwich between two of the OP cars, two of the meta cars, with two drivers that you really don't know well, especially if one of those drivers, actually both of those drivers in this case, made some really poor decisions. The guy ahead completely ran directly into Andre, and Andre in his rage wasn't paying any attention and sideswiped me. So naturally, since I was the victim, Andre was very upset with me. He dove, and not only that, he didn't give me any space. He tracked out, completely pushing me off into the dirty track. So I had no grip coming out of there. That corner is probably also the GTR's strongest corner. I was losing to the GTR pretty much no matter what every single time on that corner. I was able to make it up everywhere else, as you can see, but it didn't really matter who I was racing against. If they're in the GTR, they were able to get out of that corner much faster than I could, unfortunately. To be 100% transparent, if I were racing on my own, or if I was just doing my stream, if I was doing anything else except recording an example video for this series, I would not be so nice to Andre. And right there, I wasn't even trying to hit him. Andre was incredibly slow at that corner, as we saw on the last lap. He was so slow, in fact, that when I went the normal speed in that corner, assuming he would too, it actually damaged my front bumper. It probably damaged his rear bumper as well. He was going so slow that I thought he might actually be brake checking me, so I decided if people are going to drive like this, then I've got to do the most extreme option I can think of. As I mentioned before, since this is a strategy race, that came into play when it came to considering what car I was going to choose for the anti-meta car. As we know, this car isn't really exceptional in any one way, but it's above average in pretty much every single way, and that includes tire wear. If you've ever heard anyone talk about an undercut when it comes to tire strategy, this is essentially what it is, though this is a very extreme undercut. The idea of the undercut is essentially that your tires are going to be fresh and or potentially a softer compound than the people who are still out on the last set of tires. Your goal is to go as fast as you possibly can between the time you go into the pits and the time your opponents go into the pits. Most people are going into the pits between laps 4 and 6, and we went in the pits on lap 2. Even if our tires are kind of shredded by the time they get out of the pits, if we're in front, it's going to be much more difficult for them to overtake than it is for us to be able to defend. If you take a look, you can see that VSA Demonic set a 128.4, which was a pretty good time, and he was more than 33 seconds ahead of me at this point at the beginning, or actually the middle of lap 3. Now, since we have clean air, which is the goal, that means nothing really happens, so we're going to fast forward just a little bit. Saving your tires is advised if you're going to do a massive undercut like this, and that can be accomplished by minimizing steering angle, minimizing sliding, and also minimizing the amount of time you're on full brake. You can even just brake at 80% max to try to save your front tires, but I just decided to push. One person had decided to pit on lap 3, but they were way ahead, and then 3 more people decided to pit on lap 4, including this guy. I was able to get in front of him just enough time to defend going into corner 2, and of course I gave him space despite the fact that he was the person that ruined my last race. The very best thing you can do if you accidentally punt someone off the track is just give him the position back. Considering he punted me directly after diving from multiple tenths back, I thought he probably did it on purpose, but since it was the only interaction I ever had with him, I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I decided to treat him like a gentleman, unlike what he did to me. I gave him just enough space, and he made a mistake by getting on the throttle too hard on the curb, and that was actually the last time I saw him. You probably already knew this, but if you didn't know this and you only learned it from watching my videos, then you know that if he is within 1 second, he has the advantage of slipstream, and being in a much more powerful car, that should help him, but he also has the disadvantage of dirty air through the corners, so that can also play a part. Either way, I knew from the last race that my pace was better anyway, so I just decided to forget about it and focus again on pushing as hard as I possibly could. I also kind of wanted to set an example. I'm petty. You probably know that if you've been following me for a long time, so I did everything I possibly could on this lap to go as fast as I could. We almost had a full second over him that we put on him in just a single lap, but I was still feeling really petty and I was still pissed off that he had wasted my time. So I also really like making a statement. When you have the fastest lap and you're coming from the back, sometimes people notice that, and that actually did come into play later on, I think. I mentioned before that you can extend the life of your tires by not braking fully, by not using a lot of steering angle, and by not really sliding the tires at all, but I didn't try to do any of that at all. I was just pushing right now to get the best lap I possibly could. I think a lot of people underestimate the mental part of driving, how many weird little things you can do to kind of get in the heads of your opponents, especially on a short scale like this. When it comes to the daily races, even though this is the last one available, it's incredibly short by racing standards. These races are rarely more than 20 minutes long, and that being the case, people are usually pushing pretty much to the limits the entire race. The closer you are to the line, the closer you are to the limit, the easier it is to go over that limit, so any kind of psychological advantage that you can possibly gain is probably going to help you out. The only thing that's not great about the undercut is that there's usually not a lot of action because of it. I mean, that's good for results, but it's not great if you really like battling. and I would have actually cut out this lap, but since it was the fastest lap that I've done since this race was released, I wanted to show the entirety of it so you can see the differences in the time trial lap versus my race pace lap when it comes to me going as fast as I can. 28.1. Felt pretty good. I think I can get a 27, but I hadn't done it yet. All right, we're going to jump forward now. If you had noticed from before, the guy that was directly in front of us is the first guy that did a big undercut besides me. He went into the pits on lap 3, so his tires are 1 lap fresher than mine. I also want you to take a look at my tires. That is after 7 laps. I still have a lot of tire life left. Of course, it kind of depletes faster towards the end of the tire life, but that was still a lot of tire considering the fact that we were on it for 7 laps. Another recurring theme here is the racecraft and strategy regarding letting people go versus battling them when you know that they're faster. He might not have known that the next guy was 4 full seconds behind us, so we probably could have afforded to battle for a little bit, but he also might not have wanted to destroy his tires anymore, or he might not have been as confident with his tires when they're more worn. But either way, he just let me go, and of course that's very much appreciated. When we came out of the pits, Demonic was 33 seconds ahead. Of course, that accounts for the fact that he didn't pit yet, but starting all the way in the back, he was 5 seconds ahead at the beginning of lap 10 now. Jumping to the very end of the race, I wasn't quite able to get close enough, maybe with 1 or 2 more laps, but I was really proud of the fact that we were pretty much just a second behind him at the very end. So I was able to go up 14 positions. He did get a little squirrely on the exit there. I was kind of hoping he'd get a penalty and that I'd be able to stay within 1 second so I'd get the win, but I was definitely still happy starting with an anti-meta car in 16th position in EMEA and being able to get all the way to 2nd place. Once again, I want to thank you for watching my video. If you like what you saw, please don't forget to like, subscribe, leave me any questions you have down in the comments below, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you again.